Well, everyone, guess what time it is? It is interview time, and April has a little intro song for you. The moment I break up, before I put on my makeup, I say a little prayer for Alison Ash. Forever and ever. So anyways, we're here with Dr. Alison Ash. Third or fourth time? What are we on? Do you remember? I think it's fourth.
I think this is my fourth. Yeah.
Fourth. And still our number one downloaded episode of all time. How to Eat Pussy Like a Champ came out 4 years ago and still bypasses all of the episodes to this day. And that's not what we're talking about today. But if you have not listened to that episode, go check it out. She's also talked about how to be an intuitive lover, multiple topics. So today we're talking about breakups, and they're hard and they're sad. And I know it's not as exciting as eating pussy like a champ, but maybe we can learn how to do breakups like a champ. I don't know. So if you've listened to our past podcast episodes with Alison, you already know about Dr. Alison Ash. And welcome back to the show, Dr. Alison Ash. And can you please tell our listeners how you got to where you are today in the field of sexuality?
Oh, gosh. Well, let's see. I have a PhD from Stanford in studying sex and gender. And so my academic start was there. And I was doing research on college hookup culture and the orgasm gap and why women in heterodynamics were orgasming so much less often than their male counterparts. And I was working on this research for maybe 3 or 4 years with my advisor. And we published a paper. It was like really profound in a top journal. And then they moved on to the next project. And I was like, wait, there's so much here. How do we actually stop there from being an orgasm gap, right? Where's the application of the stuff that we're learning and researching? How do we create real world change? Because I think that feeling empowered in the bedrooms so that we can have pleasurable sexual encounters, that we can feel fully expressed, that our needs, wants, boundaries, and capacities matter is so pivotal to having just a nourishing and empowered life all around.
More. And we're going to talk about the end and the beginning, but then you have an offering coming up about tell us about your offering in the beginning and then we'll continue on the end too, right?
Sure. So I teach a course called Sexual and Emotional Intimacy Skills Master Course, and it is an 8-week virtual course that goes over a huge number of skills that I think is relevant for being able to maintain healthy emotional and sexual intimacy. So if you want to deepen the intimacy in your existing relationships, or if you want to figure out how to have more nourishing relationships than you do currently, this is the class for you.
I also want to give you some clout because one of the pieces of advice I have taken back from you out of your words and something you shared, and I don't remember on which episode it was, but communicating in the bedroom and the tapping system if you can't use your actual words. And I've talked about that on various shows before because it's such a helpful piece and you're just a genius when it comes. And I say that with full intent to give you props because you're a fucking genius. So thank you.
And I have friends that have worked with you personally for your coaching program, and we can talk about that later, but with one-on-one that are like, oh my God, she's changed my life. But we're here for other purposes. So
here we go. So let's talk about breakups. And as we said, breakups suck. You said that before we started recording. What are some of the signs you should break the fuck up?
Oh, man. Well, I think what's hard about breakups is that we can feel very different about breaking up if we are in a moment of fighting than if we've just had some hot sex versus if we've gone out and had some hot flirty interactions at the club versus you have no social life because of pandemic or you're a workaholic or whatever else, right? There's all of these different situational factors at play that can make it confusing and hard to know, should I break up? Are enough of my needs being met enough of the time? And also, what's the role of NRE, new relationship energy here? And when that wears off, we can be more discerning than we are when we are in that intoxicating flood of chemicals that we get in NRE land. And so sometimes that means that we are able to see flaws that we weren't able to see initially, but also sometimes there's a way that we can chase that NRE high. And so that's another way that it can feel a little complicated in terms of assessing fit, right? It's not a black or white science. And I think that's why so many people struggle in the should I break up phase of the breakup process, because let's face it, that's a phase.
Mm-hmm. It's a hard phase too, because you also get these outside perspectives from your friends and your family, and maybe you're asking for it or not, but you have all these different opinions on what you should or shouldn't do. And ultimately, I guess maybe I'll make this a question. And would you say that ultimately comes down to you and your own process and
or trust the peanut gallery,
or just let's just listen to
what
all
the peanut gallery saying?
All the peanuts are right. All right,
the legumes.
I have to say that I think there's a little bit of a both and, not a 50-50, but I think we do want to consider both, because it is most important to your own sense of your internal truth. You need to know what your standards are. You need to know what your non-negotiables are. Nobody's going to meet 100% of your needs 100% of the time, but you do need to understand what are the needs that you need to have met by your partner most of the time, what you're able to outsource and what you're not able to outsource. At the same time, I work with so many people out there that can have a really skewed perception of abundance versus scarcity, for example, or a really skewed perception of their own sense of self-worth and what they're deserving, or a skewed perception on how amazing their partner may be. And I think that we do want to take the input from are very trusted few. Now, if you have a super conservative parent or a friend who's always the naysayer and super critical, okay, maybe you're not trusting those valued opinions. But if everybody that you know and love is speaking the same tune to you, I think that there's something there that you might want to consider.
I think that's very valuable advice and easier said than done, everyone. And that's why
I usually don't do it.
Well, easier said than done, right? Because everyone can say all these things. This doesn't mean your system is going to be ready. So that brings me to top tips for navigating breakups with as much success or ease as possible. We can get into like, what if the tethers are there and you can't pull them? But let's talk about the tips right now for trying to make it like a smooth way, or as smooth as possible, to detach.
Right. Well, I think the first thing to realize, as you pointed to, is the fact that when we are in a deep connection, if we have an attachment bond particularly, then there's a limbic connection that we have with our loved ones. And that means that it is excruciatingly painful in our body, in our nervous systems, to even think about breaking up, let alone breaking up. And that means that we need to take exquisite care of ourselves. And that includes engaging in self-care. It includes reaching out to friends and loved ones for support and telling them where you're at, that you're going, especially if you know that you're going to break up, you can tell your trusted few that this is on the horizon so that they can make some space in their calendars to show up for you and to offer you the support that you need so that you don't have to go through it alone. Because the reality is that part of what's so hard about breakups is not just the loss of this relationship, it's also the loss of the future that you envisioned with them. It's the loss of the comfort and the sense of security and familiarity that you have with them. And so that can feel very disruptive. And whatever brings you soothing in terms of your self-care practice, as well as the friends and loved ones that you have, it's so important to bring those resources online.
Yeah, it's almost breakups, divorce. I consider a divorce breakup with paperwork is really what I think of it as. And I'm not saying that, but there's no difference really when it comes to relational. Of course, there's assets and children a lot of times with divorces. However, it is the loss or the death of something, which is why it can feel so hard. And that's why I think, and for me, I am such a lover. So breakups, whether it's a deep partnership or even something that wasn't so deep, it was maybe a person that you were banging out with for a few weeks and you kind of got attached to because you're like, this person's really cool. That can also feel like the loss of something that was good. It was a hookup. Maybe it wasn't a full relational move-in situation. So I just want to give honor to all sorts of different relationship dynamics when we're talking about breaking up, it is the loss of something. So I love that you kind of paid homage to that as well within the context of this conversation. So what if you know you should break up? I feel like this question was probably maybe made for me, but I didn't write it. What?
No. I have been there many times.
Oh, good.
Okay.
So it's maybe for everyone.
Excuse me. Like most of our friends have been in this place.
It's true. And yes. And I feel like the comfortability piece comes in a lot here. I don't want to hear what you have to say, Dr. Alison Ash, about this, because what if you know you should break up, but you feel like you just can't do it?
Well, I know.
He's laughing over.
So many people prefer the certainty of misery over the misery of uncertainty.
That's so good. You should trademark that one.
I'm telling you. Say it again. I got to write it down.
Say that again
one more time.
People prefer the certainty of misery over the misery of uncertainty.
Oh, damn.
It's the fear of the unknown. And it's also not only the fear of the unknown, but it's likely a deep-seated belief in scarcity. And sometimes that's coming from real lived experiences of scarcity, of there not being a good enough dating pool, of feeling like, I'm going to do air quotes here for the audio listeners, all the good ones are taken.
Ooh, heard that so many times.
No fishies in the sea.
Oh, come on.
Right.
8 billion people now, people. There's 8 billion.
I know.
But there's no one better than this one really hard one.
Right. Or this feeling that you don't have access to the dating pool that you want to have access to, that you can't meet the kind of people that you would like to partner with or like to date. And sometimes these can be real issues. And seeing a dating coach, an intimacy coach, and therapist can be so important because it can actually help you change some of your skills and circumstances so that you can have more access. But I think that's only one part of a fear of scarcity. There's also just this belief in there being nobody else that's going to be good enough or better for you. And so then we settle. And when we settle and our needs are not met over the long term, we build resentment. And the more resentment we build, the more angry we get, the more we fight. And inevitably, that's what pushes us to breakups. And so there is this process that happens in its own time with its own current and force. And I think what can be helpful to realize is that with enough intentional awareness and insight and resolve, and oftentimes collaboration, we might be able to get to a place where we can transition a relationship before that level of resentment has accrued, before we're so angry because our needs have been unmet for so long.
I can 100% relate to this feeling. It was a feeling kind of stuckness and needing kind of a natural process to happen to unstuck. And I think my experience, I've had multiple experiences of that. And one would be, which we are doing an episode on actually, would be more of like the charismatic narcissistic spell, which that's not what we're here focused on today, but we have an episode that we will be talking about that in the future.
Featuring Amy's past partner. Just kidding.
And also,
protagonist in this story.
But yeah, that's what we're here to talk about. But also a perfectly wonderful person, the person that was 3 or 4 years younger than me, we were talking about in the last podcast, actually, who I knew it was just the end, but I couldn't let go of it because I believed in it so much and that there was no one better out. This is the dream guy, but he's not fully invested. I was 25, he's 21 when we started dating. Like, of course he wasn't like, hey, let's do this forever. And so I like that you're sharing all these different perspectives there on why this might be so challenging for people to pull the tethers. And it's definitely easier said than done. So with that, breakups are fucking hard. So how can people cope with a breakup, especially when they're feeling so much sadness, loss, grief? What do they do?
The first thing is to accept that breakups suck. right? Like there's nothing that I'm going to tell you in this podcast that's going to make breakups not suck. I'm so sorry. I wish I had that cure. I would be really rich and probably no longer working if
a magical pill
had that capacity. Right. So give yourself a break and prepare for it to be hard. So see what you can clear out of your calendar. Give yourself time to be messy, to not have to worry about what you look like, to get to have all the ice cream that you want and watch the crappy movies that you want, but maybe not the rom-coms that are going to make you feel sad. Maybe watch the action flicks and the sci-fis or whatever else that you can get into. Watch the badass comedians that just make you laugh, and allowing yourself to indulge a little bit. It's allowing yourself to self-soothe in whatever ways feel accessible, even if they're not the most high status praised. I'm doing my yoga, eating my healthy food, and having my smoothie and going for the run kinds of things. You'll get there. But in the beginning, just do whatever it is that brings you that amount of soothing that you can find.
Fuck.
So the answer is ice cream, basically.
Ice cream and empowering movies.
Yeah. Totally.
I love that. And giving yourself permission to feel the feelings, and numbing out is easier, right? Like distracting yourself is cool, but also I realize no, distracting yourself is cool. It can be cool. Yeah. It can be. You're like, I want to go out and have dinner with my friends, and then coming home, you're like, I'm by myself right now, and I am not going to text my ex, or however you want to,
or I'm going to drink 2 glasses of wine,
name them, title them, or I'm going to drink 2, but I'm going to cry it out right now, or I'm going to be fucking pissed. I'm going to break this dish outside, and I'm like, fuck yeah.
Call me when you do that, because I love that shit.
Yeah. Well, when I went through a hard breakup, and I wanted to, like, we're going to get to this question. It's kind of,
is that when we did voodoo?
It's the context. Amy, don't give away the plot of the whole story. And I got so mad, but Amy came over, and I got a voodoo doll, and it was for the boss. It was a Secret Santa, and I didn't choose it. It chose me, and so it came with like the needles and everything, but it was about a boss, and so I used a voodoo doll. No. And I had my French friend tell me that I needed to put this person on ice. So I like wrote his name and put him on ice in the freezer, because like he can't hurt you.
Explain what that means when you put them on ice.
So you write their name on a piece of paper, and you roll it up in a little ball, and I put it in a little package, and I seal
though, right?
it.
Isn't it
No, there's no photo. Okay. Just the name, the full name, and you write it with intention, and you roll it up into the tiniest little ball, and you put it in the freezer until you want to take them out, because then they can't hurt you anymore. It's like this. She's from Paris, and she's like, "This is the French way." In the freezer, you know how many things my mother has on ice in the freezer. I was like, okay. And so I was like, I'm doing it, and it worked. I felt like it worked. And I was like, you're not going to get me now. You're on ice. So,
voodoo doll though.
The voodoo doll,
we put a face on it.
So you know what soothes you, April. I love it.
Yeah. So don't fuck with me, man. Tell you. And and I had my coven of women come over with the breakup, and it is one thing that I want to honor when there's anger. If there's resentment and anger, right? If the exit, it happens because there's some lack of integrity on one side. However, the breakup happens, there can be anger and these feelings of resentment. There could be a lot of sadness. There could be depression, and feeling the feelings is really important. But okay, but let's talk about this anger. What about when people feel angry?
I just so love this rant, because it is A, hysterical, but also B, really highlighting the range that breakups bring. And I think we do need to do the things that are soothing, and we do need to emote and not just avoid and distract, which we need plenty of. We need the ability to avoid and distract, and not shame that has its place and purpose. We also need to face the feelings and ride the waves, and whether that's grief and or anger, which I happen to think can very much feel intertwined, right? And the physical expression of that can be so helpful. So for me, I love getting in the freeway, rolling down the windows, and
I thought you were going to say freezer. I thought you were going to say freezer.
But you roll down the windows and scream?
I scream because there's something for
Windows
me
down.
about like feeling like maybe somebody could hear me, but I'm going so fast, nobody will know that it's me.
So
There's
I do the opposite. I keep them up and then I scream at the top of my lungs. But okay, so yours is that maybe someone might hear me. Okay, I
This is my thing.
it.
Yeah, I like
You
it.
got
Yeah.
your thing, right?
Yeah.
The rage rooms are also fantastic. Have you ever done a rage room?
No, what's a rage room? Please tell me. Can you smash things?
Where can we find one?
Yes.
Yes, they're all over, and you get this protective garb and all these like bats and mallets and things, and they have old electronics and things, and you just have 20 minutes and you put on like whatever music you want and you just go bonkers.
Oh my God, we need to go to stat.
I needed that.
We can still do it.
I mean, I would have brought the voodoo doll as well. I mean, I would have brought the voodoo doll to the
I
rage
burned
room.
the voodoo doll in the temple of Burning Man this year.
Did I give you that voodoo doll?
Yeah,
to
you
burn?
did. It's dead now.
Oh.
It went off. Well, it's not dead. It's transitioned.
I gave you some other things to burn too. Anyway, okay, so that's cool,
Yeah.
Allison. I like these rage rooms. Okay.
What else you got? I
Yeah,
know you got more.
What else? I know. Now I'm like, please tell me more.
I really like smashing things. So going to the dollar store or the thrift store, whatever you can find, garage sale, buying some old ceramics, and then finding a place where you're not going to create too much of a mess. It's going to be a safety hazard. Just, a little PSA, don't do it in like next to a schoolyard or something, but just like find your place and like not just smash them against the wall, but verbalize and vocalize as you're smashing it. What is it that you need to say? What is it that you need to express? And scream it and let it out. And there is sometimes a witnessing element. I think that's why I like to roll down the windows. So if you want to, and that's what's so beautiful about your friendship is, like she's like, let me know when you're ready. I want to be there. Like,
I'm gonna stab some shit. Yeah.
Having a witness could be great. So look, calling your best friend to come and smash some stuff with you can be even more cathartic.
Well, I also, everyone that was there was only 4 women, but they all bared witness to me cutting our pictures in half. And I was like, this is me cutting our relationship. And
it's like full-on ceremony.
It was a ceremony. And that's the thing, giving intention, because I was like, you hurt me and this hurts and I am done. And they're in when I got a divorce, and this isn't about me, of course, but everybody's different. And my divorce was less of a cathartic experience. It was more of like this really strange where I didn't do all the ritualistic things that I feel like helped me. And Amy was a huge part of helping me heal and not being like, fuck that guy. She's like, hey, feel these things and let's just honor your feelings and know that it's time for you to honor yourself. And I was like,
and go find someone to work with.
Well, yeah. That as well.
That also don't do the work on your own. And I also have done what you're talking about, not just takeaway, but also
slash some tires.
I've not slashed tires. I've talked April out of doing that actually.
Yes, she did. Yes, she did.
Don't do that, everyone. No keying cars, no slashing tires. But I have done a similar ritual as you for, it was, well, the ex-partner we're talking about, what did we break up like 5 times?
Narcissist?
Yeah, the 5 times. We're going to say he has narcissistic tendencies. Anyways, it was the Women's March. Was that 2017?
So 2017.
And I went with 2 friends to the thrift store and we got a bunch of old plates. But what we did is took Sharpies and wrote on them and wrote our messages. And then we got some like big old ceramic like ducks and things, and it took bats. But we laid
Where'd
down.
you go?
At our friend's house that I can't say names, but our friend's house in her backyard downtown, actually. So we're like, sorry, neighbors. But we put out a tarp so that it would collect all of the matter. And we wrote our messages because all 3 of us felt hurt through just some sort of heartbreak. And we wrote our messages and then we just smashed that shit. And it felt so good. I think I was crying during it. It just like that cathartic process that needed to come through felt so powerful. So yeah, done. I've done that. We like to break things. And what about lighting things on fire? How do you feel about that?
All right.
Well, I am a burner, so there's a time and a place. But again, make sure you have your safety first. I'll say that when we're thinking about the breakup process, it's also important to note that it's not linear. So you're going to have your anger phases. You're going to have your crying phases. You're going to have your empowered, I'm going to do me and reclaim phases. And to allow for some spaciousness in all of that, and to notice when the shoulds are coming in and you're creating that second arrow, that Buddhist concept of the second arrow. So the first arrow is the breakup. And the second arrow that's causing pain is your judgment around how you're relating to the breakup and how you should be doing it better. And so noticing when that second arrow is coming in and where you can give yourself a little bit more permission to be in whatever phase of the breakup that you're in. And we don't want to get stuck. I'm not advocating that you wallow. I do think, just as you're pointing to, that it's really helpful to get some support and some therapeutic support if you feel like you are getting too stuck. But to just realize that this isn't a linear process, that sometimes you're going to be feeling better and then you're going to have a crappy day that comes out of nowhere, and to almost anticipate that and give some space for that to unfold, I think can be really normalizing and helpful and de-shamifying.
I cried last night about a breakup that happened in 2019, not about wanting to be with that person, about new pain that came up. And it was not about sadness or missing that person. It was new anger and hurt and pieces that have continued to unfold. And it's what 2022 broke up in 2019.
Wow.
But I was, letting myself like bawl and feel it. And, 99% of the time I don't feel that, but it just, sometimes it comes out because there was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain.
I won't throw out this sweatshirt that I wore for a month straight. I didn't shower or like take off this sweatshirt. That was my comfort blanket, like a cocoon that through my divorce, did not take it off. I won't throw it away. I haven't worn it since then, since 2016. I like look at it and it's like my homage to like my marriage and my divorce. Like I like it has holes and that's the same thing. It's like you can't, sometimes you just need it's like a totem, right? It's like a totem that you need to hold on to.
Well, it's a journey too,
and
right?
It's a journey.
It's not just like, all right, one and done. And even though I did feel after that breakup in 2019,
you can borrow my breakup sweatshirt if you ever need
I'll borrow it. I mean, I'm fine. And when I say I'm fine, I'm not like, it has nothing to like, I have no desire to be with this person at like zero, and felt that since 2019, like not even 1 second of desiring that, but it took me 5.5 years to get there. And so I don't need that sweater, but I'm just saying
it's a sweatshirt.
Sorry, sweatshirt. But I'm just saying that like you're saying, it's a journey or a roller coaster. It doesn't mean that it'll all be clear. And especially I feel like maybe this could be a question. The longer you're in something, maybe the more challenging or longer the process might be. I don't know how you feel about that. I mean, maybe it's not like a hard rule, but what do you think about that?
I do think there is some effect of duration of a relationship because you have so much of your life intertwined and enmeshed, and this level of integration that can be really hard to detangle from. But I also think it can feel really invalidating for people for whom are in shorter relationships, but fell really hard. And they still feel so crushed because they can get that narrative from their friends of, oh, you were only with him for 2 months. Get over it already. And sometimes it can feel like just this real quick attachment bond. And there's different levels of attachment. And I think it is important to note that, but breakups can feel really hard, even when you have had a shorter period of time. It can feel that second arrow of other people not validating that it's hard, can also be really challenging, of not getting that same social support that you might get otherwise.
That's a good point, Dr. Ash. I always want to say Alison, but I'm like, no, I need to give you a clout. Because it doesn't necessarily, you can be emotionally bonded to someone very quickly and not know them very long. I mean, history sometimes doesn't serve us well. We've been alluding to this a little bit throughout like the different tangents that we've been going on, but what can breakups teach us, or how can we use them as a toolbox for moving forward in our lives?
It's such an important question because there is so much growth that is coming out of these transitional experiences. They're very potent and very powerful. And ideally, every relationship that we have is better than the one that we had before it. That we know more of both what we need as well as what we don't want to do without. Like, oh, I really love that about this person that I was with. Great. You now know that this is part of what you need moving forward. This is valuable, hard-earned wisdom that you have. And I think something that can be really helpful to do is to engage in a reflection process where you're exploring some intentional questions post-breakup. And I think this can be helpful to do several months out of a breakup when you're past that kind of shock phase and the real trauma of the separation and the detangling and the limbic pain of the breakup, because it's helpful to have a little bit more perspective. But certain questions that could be really useful are things like, what I love and appreciated about them, what worked for me, what didn't work for me, what were some things that I can own about how I showed up that wasn't helpful or maybe made the relationship challenging. What are some things that I now know that I need moving forward? What are some things that I want to make amends for? What are some things that I would like to receive amends for? And sometimes you can actually have a conversation like this with your ex at a later date. And sometimes they're not available for something like that. And even if they're not available for this kind of more conscious uncoupling way of moving through a breakup process, this, we're all kind of shaking our heads because it sounds so lovely and it can feel
Paltrow.
Yeah, it's just like,
But she didn't create it, everyone.
No, we had the author on our show.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reality is that there's a phrase, conscious uncoupling, which means a certain thing. But the reality is that we can break up in ways that feel more intentional and ways that feel really sloppy and messy. And when we're thinking about the more intentional end of the spectrum, that can include this kind of self-reflection and meeting back up and sharing it with your ex and going over this, because that can be a way to find this mythical sense of closure that we all want. And, maybe mythical is not the right adjective to use. I just say that because I think people are like hanging on for this fix. It's part of this prescription of this fix that's going to make us bald.
Like if I only had this,
it's
everything
fictional. It's fictional at some level, right? Yeah,
that's right. But there is a way that you can kind of feel like you're tying up loose ends and that you're getting this perspective, and perspective can help give that feeling of completion. Mm-hmm. Right. And so sometimes being able to share things in a way that you're not able to share it in the end of a relationship or breakup phase later down the line can feel really healing.
So you're talking about this closure conversation. So how, maybe this will make this a two-part question. How would I say April and I broke up, which we're never going to do because we're together forever. Sorry, April, you stuck with me for life. But say April and I were together for 8 years and we broke up and we took this time apart, and I would like to initiate a closure conversation. What, maybe some tools, like what that would look like. And then what if the partner's unwilling? What if I'm like, April, I want to have this conversation with you, and she's a no to that? What can I do within myself to have my own closure?
Yeah.
Other than break shit.
Well, I think the first thing is to notice when you're asking for this conversation. If you're asking to have this conversation and you've just broken up, it might be very different than if you reach out a few months, 4, 5, 6 months down the line. So timing is an important thing to consider. I would wait for a while. Well, I mean, it depends on your relationship dynamic. You might have the kind of relationship where you can say, let's meet up in 4 months and have a conversation then. Or you might not have that kind of dynamic when you're breaking up and just reach out several months down the line and ask for consent. Hey, I would love to have a conversation with you to share some reflections that I have about our time together and to see if you have any reflections that you're open to sharing with me. Are you available for something like that? And if this is kind of coming out of left field, this isn't maybe something that is familiar to either one of you, you might give them some more specifics. Some things I would love to share with you include things that I've learned and ways that I've grown, and some things that I want to apologize for, and some things I want to offer forgiveness for. And I want to share about some of the positive times that we had together and some positive wishes and intentions that I have for you. And I want to give some space to answer any questions that you might have And there's actually a couple of questions that I'm noticing that I have that I think would be helpful for me to know as we're, really completing this relationship that we've shared.
I love that. And I also want to add to that, Alison, something that has been helpful when I've reached out to previous or ex-partners. I always say previous. I'm like, no, not like I'm not a widower or widow. Yes. Yeah. I'm like ex-partners. But like, and you can correct me if you think that this is not good advice, but Alison, but don't expect to hear back. And I feel like the spaciousness, because sometimes I reached out to my ex-husband like a year and a half or 2 years ago, and we hadn't spoken in years. And I WhatsApped him, and I gave him a lot of accolades and just said, I hope you know how much you meant to me. And I know that there was a lot of hurt when we split ways. And I just want you to know that you deserve just so much love. And I honor and want you to know I honor every year. And I will honor like you moving forward in my life always, because you're such a fucking cool person. And thank you for what you've done with me. And I was like, I don't expect you. And I said, I'm like, you do not have to answer this. I just want you to know this information. And this was years later. And I promised myself, I'm like, I have no expectations with sending this message. And when I did receive a message back, I was like, yeah. But it was also really nice when he wasn't like, fuck you, motherfucker. He was like, hey,
it's like a bonus.
He was
something.
Really sweet. So I don't know what you have to say about that. And I'm just sharing a personal story because that is very personal to me. And it took me a long time to reach out because I had a lot of shame and guilt about our breakup. And I was not ready. So I don't know if you have anything to share in those regards as well.
I think that's a really, really important question though.
And I love the way that you approached that. And I have to say, it takes an incredible amount of strength to say you don't have to respond and to be able to offer that kind of gift without needing to receive, to want to receive in return, but not needing it. And I want to applaud the fact that you took the time that you needed to be able to do it in that kind of a way, because I imagine that there were a lot of points earlier in your history where you might have even been able to say that, but not actually fully mean it. And that's setting you up for a lot of pain and maybe pulling you back into the grief process. And energetically, it lands very differently for the other person when there are these implicit strings attached. And so I just think that it's so beautiful the way that you approach that. And I'm really delighted that he was able to reciprocate. And I think that there's really healing there for both of you.
I was so excited to hear from him too. And I was like, thank you. And
everything you said is true. Because I was like the stand-in, non-therapist for their relationship a lot, where I come and visit them maybe a couple times a year in LA, and they would talk about their relationship. And he is such a wonderful, wonderful human. She's not bullshitting, right? Like, we're not saying go bullshit someone like everything was great. Every year was fabulous, but there really was a lot of love there. So we're not saying to go, we're saying be authentic. That's what you did. And I can still totally stand by you.
There were hard years too, but it wasn't important at that point. Yeah. Like, I wanted to address how great the years that we shared together were and like the overall. So yes, absolutely. And yes, I was fully authentic. And I think that's one piece, though. I think sometimes people will reach out and expect something. And I think expectations, if you can limit those, that's important, because expectations really they can just lead to disappointment. So have zero expectations, honor yourself. And I think lead with love would be my advice, but like, that's up to the human, but that's what my advice would be.
So I really did not intend for this to happen on this day, but this morning I sent a text message to the person I broke up, but we mutually broke up with each other in 2019. And the way I set it up was, I don't have any expectations. But essentially I'm the one that's uncovering a lot of deep anger and hurt. And again, we're not going to talk a lot about that relationship on this episode, but the way I ended it was, you don't have to respond. And I'm just like, I'm letting you know, I'm pulling up old anger and resentment stuff that I wasn't aware of that is here now. And if you want to hear me in it, then I'm here and available for that. And if you don't, I don't need you for that. I can go and do that on my own. I'll burn it down on my own and take care of myself. I'm well supported. And your response will actually inform me on how we will engage in public. We can just be peaceful acquaintances, and that's fine.
Because Santa Cruz be small,
Yes.
Santa Cruz is small.
And I said, and this is not a threat. This is my truth. truth. And so it was a kind of a different approach, a little bit more of like, there's new stuff here. And also I said, I can't guarantee we're going to be friends and family after either, because that's just where I'm at with this piece there too. And
he responded and she hasn't looked
I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't looked at it responded yet. So yeah, that's a whole different episode, but still authentic though. And I sat with it. I sent that message to 2 different friends to ask them to look
Why
it
don't you
over.
send it to me? I'm not an expert.
Busy. You're busy. You're busy. And to look it over to make sure it wasn't like full of any sort of bullshit or wasn't pointing fingers or that it felt, and they would ask me questions back. And so I think that this is helpful, which brings me to just the last question before we want to know more about you. But what if, so he did respond. He did. I haven't looked at it yet. I think it might say that he's willing to talk. I don't know.
Do you want to read it on air, Amy? No, I'm just kidding.
Let's read it on air. But here's the thing. I said it one, if he didn't respond, I'm just fucking fine. I'm fine. Maybe. And because I have lots of therapists and friends and I've done a lot of work around this. And when I say fine, I know people are like, I'm okay, I'm fine. But when I say fine, I mean, I know how to navigate this and I don't have to do it with this person. What if the person's unwilling though? They're a no. And now I have to go, and they're not Amy where I'm like, I can do this on my own.
You sent the message with this heartfelt, emotional context and
they're like, no, I won't talk to you.
They iced you.
Yeah. And you don't have the skills, tools, or support. What are some of the skills, tools, or support when someone is a no and you're trying to ask for closure?
Well, I think the first piece is when you're answering these reflection questions, processing your breakup, you're already engaging in the completion process without them. They don't need to be a part of that at all. And that's that empowering reclaiming of your own energy, your own autonomy, your own wisdom, and your own sense of truth. And so going through a process of exploring how you feel and what you learned about a breakup is deeply valuable, whether or not they're going to hear it. And it can be painful if they're not available to show up for that conversation. And so being with that pain and frustration is a part of the process. And then finding somebody who will witness you in it. And maybe you can do a role play. Maybe they're willing to be a stand-in for your ex.
I'm looking at April. I'm like, April, you want to be my... I could probably try. I bet I do a good job.
It can be very helpful to simulate it as much as you can. Imagine getting to say it to them. Even writing them a letter that you can't send to them because you want to abide by consent. And if they're not available for the conversation, it's important that you honor their needs for space and boundary. But you can still write them a letter as if you were sending it to them and imagine that they're getting to hear it. And it isn't going to feel the same. It isn't. That's the reality of it. But to outsource your healing on their availability for that conversation is unfair to you and disempowering. You do not need to have that conversation with them to move on and to find the healing that you seek. But you might not be able to do that completely on your own. So having friends, having a therapist and coach, getting the support that you need, there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's a huge amount of wisdom and courage when you reach out in these kinds of times of need.
That's the thing. And that's where having you on the show so many times, I learn something from you every single time you're on the show because you are just so brilliant. And the way that you speak to all humans, it doesn't matter the gender, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, your upbringing, no matter how long you've been in a relationship, no matter what your experiences are, I feel like you really do speak to all humans. And thank you for that, Dr. Alison Ash, which brings me to our final question. And of course, it's not a goodbye. It's almost a see you later because you'll be on our show again because you have so many gifts and so many tools. But will you tell folks how, number one, your other work that you do, because there's so many different facets of your work. Also, how people can find and work with you. I don't know if you're still doing one-on-ones or what that looks like, but please share more about you.
I'd be happy to. Yeah. My website is TurnON.love. So you can go there and find out all about my workshop offerings, my live and on-demand classes, my sexual and emotional intimacy skills master course, and my coaching practice. I am still working with individuals and couples. And I also have a whole team of TurnON.love coaches working with me now who are trained in my philosophy and methodology that are fully equipped to support you in being able to cultivate the level of intimacy that you want, whether it's dealing with a breakup or dating and finding the next person that you want to partner with, or improving the quality of your relationship so that it can be more nourishing and enduring. And these are all things that I or my coaches would love to support you with.
And remind us of your course again, one more time, that's coming up.
Yes. Sexual and emotional intimacy skills. It's an 8-week virtual course. It's participatory. So there's a large cohort of folks that you'll get to do the class with, but everything is optional. So if you don't want to do an exercise or discussion, you can always sit it out, and everything is recorded. So if you can't catch something live, it's all available for you. And we go over things like how to take care of your nervous system and be more embodied and have more emotional intelligence and be more empathetic, and how do you flirt and seduce and actually express desire in ways that's going to allow those desires to be met more often. How do you get out of your head and be in your body and increase your capacity for pleasure so you can have and give more pleasure, and exploring your fantasies and unpacking any shame that might be preventing you from having the level of pleasure that you would like. And then, of course, we'll talk about the nitty and gritty of consent and conflict and how to heal when we have ruptures in relationships so that we can actually deepen intimacy and get closer after we have fights rather than feeling more distant and farther apart. And we'll talk about how do you pick partners and how do you end relationships, which I have to say, even if you're partnered, because this class is great for people who are single as well as partnered, and monogamous as well as non-monogamous. So even if you're in a monogamous partnered relationship, you are picking partners all the time. You're picking friendships, you're picking work colleagues, you're picking relationships all the time. And you're also ending relationships all the time. And learning how to work with grief and how to end relationships is so valuable. We are sorely missing in our society an understanding of how to end relationships in healthy ways. Mm-hmm. And so I think that this is something that's a valuable skill to include.
Fuck yes. And I should just call you Dr. Allie, because that actually is AKA Dr. Alison Ash. Dr. Allie. You always have the best. That's launching. So that course is dropping in October 2022.
That course is dropping in January of 23.
Okay. January 2023, y'all.
Plenty of time to sign up, y'all.
So sign up.
And tickets are more affordable the earlier you get them. So don't wait.
Okay.
Do not wait.
TurnON.love.
You'll hear this all.
You'll also, I know you may. All of the links to all of Dr. Allie's work will be on our website, shamelesssex.com. And you can, of course, find all of this on Shameless Sex Podcast on Instagram. I don't like saying goodbye to you, Allie, but all right, sorry, Dr. Allie. I always feel so funny when I say doctor, but it's true. It's true.
I think it sounds sexy when you say that.
Doctor. Especially when you say it like that.
And we will see you again very soon. And thank you for all of the things that you just contribute to the world. So much gratitude. Thank you to all of our listeners out there, the Shameless Sex Revolutionaries. Share this with your mom, your dad, your friends, your grandma, your grandpa,
your dog.
Anyone that's over 18. And then when they turn 18, you send them the link on their 18th birthday. Just send it to them, because you know what? It helps the world have more shameless sex, and we love each and every one of you. Go ahead, give us a 5-star review on iTunes and now Spotify. It helps more people find people like Dr. Allie, who offer this beautiful world of navigating breakups, but also navigating relationships. We love you all. We'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Shameless Sex. Ciao for now.
Bye.